Have you ever paused to wonder if finding true love becomes more challenging as we age? Or how the expectations and dynamics of dating evolve? For many of us in our later years, it can sometimes feel like the pool of options has dried up, leaving us questioning if love is still within reach. But let me tell you, it's never too late to learn, to grow, and to find meaningful connections, even if the road is a little bumpier than it used to be. In today's video, I want to share a deeply personal story that I believe will resonate with anyone who has struggled with the realities of dating later in life. It's a journey filled with twists and turns, from the highs of newfound hope to the lows of disappointing outcomes. Along the way, I learned some surprising lessons about what matters when seeking a life partner. These lessons have profoundly changed how I view love, compatibility, and emotional connection. I'll take you through the tough choices I had to make while searching for companionship, and I'll share why, after facing several setbacks in the world of matchmaking, I came to realize that relationships are far more intricate than we often give them credit for. Finding love isn't just about common interests or shared experiences. It's about understanding what truly holds two people together as they navigate life's complexities. As we move through this story, I'll uncover some hard truths about relationships. Why material things alone can't sustain a connection, how our priorities shift with age, and the ways we redefine love as we grow older. I hope that this video will not only offer valuable insights into dating and companionship for those of us in our golden years, but also challenge some of the assumptions we might hold about what it means to truly connect with someone. If you've ever felt disheartened by the dating scene, if you're wondering whether it's worth putting yourself out there again, or if you're simply curious about the wisdom I've gained from my own experiences, I encourage you to stay with me until the very end. You may discover something that completely changes how you think about love and relationships moving forward. And if this is your first time here, welcome. I'd love for you to join this community by subscribing and activating the notification bell so you'll never miss any of my future videos. Your support means the world to me. If this story resonates with you or you find it helpful, please consider liking the video and sharing it with someone who might benefit from it. Lastly, I'd love to hear your feedback. If you enjoy the topic of this video, drop a 1 in the comments. If it doesn't quite hit the mark, comment 0, and let me know how I can improve and bring you better content. Your thoughts help me grow and create videos that truly matter to you. Now, let's dive into the story. For a while, a profound and unrelenting emptiness seemed to settle into every corner of my life. After losing my wife, Susan, I was consumed by a loneliness so deep it felt as if I were drifting in an endless sea with no shore in sight. Each day felt heavier than the last, and I began searching for ways to bring back even a sliver of happiness. The idea of finding someone new, someone who could fill the gaping void in my heart, started to take root. Though hesitant, I reached out to a professional matchmaker, clinging to the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance to rediscover joy and connection. When the matchmaker arranged 2 dates, I approached them with cautious optimism. But to my dismay, both experiences left me feeling more hollow than before. The people I met seemed pleasant enough, but there was no spark, no sense of connection that could come close to what I had shared with Susan. It was as if the universe was gently, but firmly, reminding me that finding the one at this stage of life was far more complicated than I had imagined. The realization hit me like a wave. Perhaps it was better to face the solitude than to settle for a relationship that lacked true happiness or compatibility. It was a heartbreaking conclusion, but one that brought me a strange sense of peace. Reflecting on my life with Susan, I realized how much I had taken for granted. Our home had been a sanctuary, a place filled with laughter, warmth, and shared dreams. I had the freedom to make decisions about the little things, from what we had for dinner to choosing a new piece of furniture for the living room. Susan rarely objected, and our son, Michael, was content to let me take the lead. Of course, there were moments of disagreement, as every marriage has, but those moments were small ripples in an otherwise calm and harmonious sea. Life with Susan was fulfilling in ways I never fully appreciated until she was gone. 2 years ago, everything changed. Susan's passing was sudden and left me shattered in a way words can barely capture. The grief felt like an endless storm, battering my spirit and stealing the light from my days. In an attempt to cope, I turned to daily exercise, running, lifting weights, anything to distract myself from the ache in my chest. It helped, to a point, but no amount of physical exertion could fill the emptiness where her companionship once thrived. Well-meaning friends and family urged me to find someone new. They made calls, sent me messages, and even tried to introduce me to women they thought I might like. But I wasn't ready. My heart simply wasn't open to the idea. I turned down every invitation, retreating further into myself. Eventually, I moved in with Michael, who lived nearby with his wife and young son, Jason. Being around family brought me a sense of purpose. Helping out with chores and spending time with Jason filled my days with small moments of joy. Yet, as much as I loved being with my family, I couldn't ignore the challenges. Michael worked long hours, and their household was already stretched thin financially. I didn't want to be a burden, so I contributed as best I could. My modest pension of just over $400 a month went toward groceries, bills, and little treats for Jason. While it wasn't much, it was my way of giving back, of ensuring I wasn't just another mouth to feed. Still, the longer I stayed, the more I felt the weight of my presence. Michael was busy with his career, Jason was growing older and spending more time at school, and I often found myself alone in a house that once felt so lively. The solitude began to seep back in, reminding me of the loss I had tried so hard to escape. It was then, in a moment of quiet desperation, that I decided to take a leap I had avoided for so long. I reached out to the matchmaker. Looking back, the experience taught me something invaluable. Life doesn't always offer the solutions we hope for, and sometimes, it's in the acceptance of what is that we find peace. I realized that the love I shared with Susan was irreplaceable, and that was okay. While the future might hold new connections and unexpected joys, I've learned that embracing my own company and cherishing the memories of a life well lived can be just as fulfilling. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. When I first spoke to the matchmaker, I decided to be completely transparent about my needs and expectations. I explained that I was looking for a younger woman, someone who still had energy and vitality, yet was free of significant financial burdens. It wasn't just about age or appearance. I yearned for someone gentle, understanding, and easygoing. After decades of being the one to shoulder responsibilities and make household decisions, I worried that being with someone too strong-willed might create unnecessary friction. Most importantly, I opened up about my financial situation. My pension was modest, and if I were to remarry, I needed a partner who could also contribute to supporting my family, especially my sons, Michael and Jason. It was a vulnerable admission, but I felt it was necessary to start this process with honesty. The matchmaker listened intently, nodding thoughtfully as I spoke. A few days later, she introduced me to Laura. She described her as a 43-year-old divorced mother with a 6-year-old daughter. Laura worked for a government agency, earning a steady income of $2,000 per month. She owned her home, had a car, and seemed to embody the stability and independence I admired. On paper, Laura appeared to be everything I had hoped for. The matchmaker assured me that her personality, kind, steady, and nurturing, might be exactly what I needed. Hearing this, I felt a cautious optimism rise within me. At 62, meeting someone 19 years younger sounded like a chance to bridge my aging world with a sense of renewal. Perhaps she would bring vitality where I felt weary, and I could offer her the steadiness that comes with experience. I thought to myself, if she truly has a kind and compassionate heart, maybe this could work. When the day of our meeting arrived, I was filled with a mixture of nervousness and curiosity. As soon as I saw Laura, I was struck by her elegance. She carried herself with quiet confidence, and her smile was both warm and disarming. She was more than just attractive. There was an undeniable depth in her presence. We began to talk, and immediately, I was captivated by her thoughtful nature. She asked meaningful questions, listened with genuine interest, and shared insights that made our conversation feel effortless. Her poise and intelligence were refreshing, and for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope for something more than companionship. At one point, she asked me about the kind of relationship I was looking for. I didn't hold back. I told her I wanted a gentle partner, someone who could bring peace to my life after years of turbulence. I hoped for a relationship rooted in mutual understanding and respect. To my surprise, her response was profound. She said softly, "Gentleness in a woman often depends on the man she's with. When a man offers unconditional love, warmth, and safety, a woman feels free to be gentle. But when a man is distant or cold, even the most tender heart can harden." Her words left me speechless. They weren't just poetic, they carried a truth I had overlooked. It made me realize that relationships were about creating the right environment, not just finding the right person. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine what life could be like with someone who valued emotional connection as deeply as I did. However, the conversation soon shifted to finances, a topic I knew could be delicate. Laura, with her pragmatic and straightforward demeanor, asked me, "What is your income like? How are you managing things now? And if we were to build a life together, how do you see us handling our financial responsibilities?" Her questions were fair, but they made my chest tighten with a mix of apprehension and insecurity. I wanted to be honest, but I feared how she might perceive my situation. Would she understand the sacrifices I had made for my family? Or would she see me as a man asking too much and offering too little in return? As I began to answer, I realized that this meeting wasn't just about finding a partner. It was about confronting my vulnerabilities and the realities of dating at this stage of life. Laura's calm gaze reminded me of something I hadn't felt in years: the possibility of being truly seen and understood. Whether or not this meeting would lead to a partnership, it was already teaching me something invaluable about myself and the kind of connection I longed for. I hesitated briefly, my heart weighing heavy with vulnerability, before deciding that honesty was the best path forward. With a steady but uncertain voice, I explained how most of my pension went toward supporting my son, Michael, and my grandson, Jason. I shared how I also contributed to the household expenses, making sure to pitch in for groceries and other necessities regularly. By the time all the bills were settled, I was left with only about $400 for myself at the end of each month. As I spoke, I could feel the shift in the atmosphere between us. The warmth in Laura's eyes began to dim, replaced by an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Was it disappointment? Frustration? Perhaps a blend of both. Either way, it stung. Laura sighed deeply, and her voice, though calm, carried an edge of blunt honesty. "Look," she began, "I'm not looking for a man to support me financially. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself and my daughter. I don't need someone to pay my bills or take care of us." She paused, her eyes searching mine, before continuing. "But at the same time, I can't be in a relationship where I'm expected to shoulder someone else's financial burdens. If all you have left at the end of the month is $400, what happens if we hit a rough patch? What am I supposed to rely on then?" Her words cut deep, more than I had anticipated, though I couldn't fault her logic. Laura had every right to protect the life she had worked so hard to build. She went on to explain her perspective, her tone softening as she described the life she had carved out for herself and her daughter, a life of stability and independence. She owned her home, drove her car, and maintained a steady income. Her ex-husband's child support ensured that her daughter's needs were met. "The reason I even considered dating again," she said, her voice laced with a mix of longing and resignation, "was to fill the emotional void in my life. I wanted someone to share moments with, to lean on when things got tough, not someone who might add to my burdens." I listened intently, feeling the weight of her words settle over me like a heavy blanket. She wasn't wrong. but it didn't make the rejection any easier to bear. The matchmaker, sensing the tension thickening between us, tried to salvage the conversation with light-hearted remarks, but the gap between Laura's expectations and my reality had already grown too wide to bridge. The initial spark of connection we had felt was quickly extinguished by the cold truths of our circumstances. As our conversation dwindled, it became clear to both of us that continuing to meet was futile. Despite the mutual respect we shared, our lives were on parallel tracks that would never converge. That night, I left the meeting feeling a mixture of sadness and resignation. Laura had seemed so extraordinary, kind, articulate, and driven, a woman who carried herself with a quiet strength. I had imagined, however briefly, that she might have been someone I could build a connection with. But I also knew, deep down, that I couldn't change the person I was or the life I had chosen to live. Supporting my family was an integral part of my identity, and it was something I wasn't willing to compromise on, not even for the possibility of love. As I reflected on the experience, I realized how complicated relationships become later in life. They demand not just emotional compatibility but also alignment in values, circumstances, and expectations. The truth is, meeting someone wonderful doesn't always mean it's meant to be. Sometimes, life's complexities create barriers too great to overcome, even when the feelings are genuine. Laura had appreciated my honesty. That much was clear. For a brief moment, I think she even admired my dedication to my family. But when the reality of my financial situation became evident, it was a deal-breaker for her. I couldn't fault her for that. She had every right to protect the life she had worked so tirelessly to create for herself and her daughter. And yet, knowing all this didn't make the rejection any less painful. It's a strange feeling, being dismissed for something you take pride in. I would never apologize for supporting Michael and Jason, even if it meant making my own life harder. That's just who I am, a father and grandfather who prioritizes family above all else. In the end, I informed the matchmaker that I wouldn't pursue another meeting with Laura. As much as I admired her, I couldn't be with someone who didn't see my sacrifices as a strength rather than a liability. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is accept when something isn't meant to work out. So I let go, though not without a tinge of sorrow. This experience, if nothing else, reminded me of the delicate balance between love and practicality, and how, sometimes, even the strongest connections aren't enough to overcome life's complexities. The matchmaker wasn't ready to give up on me, even after my last experience. A few weeks later, she reached out again, her voice filled with optimism, and said she had someone new in mind. This time, it was Rachel, a 52-year-old retired insurance agent with a steady monthly income of $1,500. She was described as elegant and refined, a woman with a calm demeanor and a mind sharp enough to impress anyone. Despite my hesitations and the reluctance that weighed on me from the previous attempt, I agreed to meet her. Deep down, I wasn't sure if I had the energy to put myself out there again, to risk the vulnerability this process demanded. When the day finally came, I arrived early, scanning the room nervously. My heart pounded in a way that reminded me of a much younger version of myself, unsure and uncertain. Then, from across the room, I saw them, the matchmaker walking beside Rachel. My breath caught, and for a moment, I forgot how to move. Rachel was radiant. Her fair complexion glowed, her wavy hair fell perfectly into place, and her outfit was so fashionable it could have graced the pages of a magazine. She moved with such grace and confidence that I felt utterly unprepared. The glasses she wore added an air of sophistication, even if they seemed more for style than function. In that instant, a wave of insecurity slammed into me like a tidal force. How could someone like her, so poised, so put together, possibly be interested in someone like me? I felt exposed, as though every wrinkle, every scar of life's battles, was on display for her to see. My inner voice was merciless. She's out of your league. Why did you even agree to this? I had spent so much of my life being honest about who I was, and what I brought to the table, But now, standing in her presence, all I could feel was doubt. What if people only saw me as too old or too worn down? The humiliation of rejection loomed large in my mind. As they approached, panic set in. I couldn't do it. I couldn't risk the embarrassment of being dismissed outright. Without thinking, I blurted out to the matchmaker, "I just realized my phone is dead, and I'm expecting an important call. I can't stay. I'll need to reschedule." My excuse was laughably thin, but at that moment, I didn't care. I was desperate to escape before I made a fool of myself. Without waiting for a reply, I turned and began to walk away, my heart pounding in both shame and relief. But the matchmaker wasn't having it. "Wait," she called out firmly, her tone a mix of exasperation and encouragement. "Rachel already has a good impression of you. Why don't you at least sit down and talk with her for a little while?" Her words stopped me in my tracks. I felt trapped between my overwhelming fear of rejection and a growing guilt for leaving so abruptly. The matchmaker had put effort into arranging this, and Rachel, despite my assumptions, hadn't done anything to deserve my abrupt exit. Reluctantly, I turned back and agreed to stay for a short conversation. As I sat across from Rachel, I felt like a fish out of water. Her polished presence seemed to highlight all the ways I felt inadequate. I couldn't help but think about the disparity between us. She has everything: stability, sophistication, independence. What could she possibly see in me? But then, she smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached her eyes, and something in me softened. Her gaze wasn't judgmental or dismissive, it was kind and steady, like someone who was truly willing to listen. "Age doesn't matter to me," she said simply, her voice calm yet reassuring. "I don't think you're too old. What's important is whether we align in what we're looking for." Her words struck me deeply. Here was a woman who had every reason to judge me, every reason to turn away, and yet she didn't. My self-doubt had painted her as someone unapproachable, but in reality, she was open and grounded. At that moment, I realized that maybe, just maybe, my fears had been louder than the truth. And perhaps I owed it to myself, and her, to see where this conversation might lead. For a fleeting moment, Rachel's words kindled a fragile spark of hope within me. Yet, as quickly as it appeared, that hope dimmed when she added with unwavering conviction, "That said, I do have specific requirements when it comes to finding a husband, and I don't compromise on those. I've spent too many years figuring out what I want to settle for less." Her voice was steady, unflinching, and unapologetically firm, a tone that spoke of years of self-reflection and hard-earned clarity. The matchmaker, clearly intrigued by Rachel's candor, leaned forward, her curiosity palpable. "And what are those requirements? What do you consider non-negotiable?" she asked, her voice tinged with both admiration and professional interest. Rachel wasted no time explaining. She had a fixed income, owned her home outright, and had her car. Materially, she was secure, perhaps even enviable, and she made it abundantly clear that she wasn't willing to lower her standards. Over the years, friends had introduced her to various potential partners, but none had met her expectations. "It's not just about finances," she said firmly, her gaze steady. "I've built a comfortable, independent life, and I need a partner who can either match that or contribute to it. Otherwise, I'm perfectly fine on my own." If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 2 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Her honesty struck a chord, part admiration for her confidence, part discomfort with her rigidity. As I sat there, grappling with my feelings, I felt a sudden need to speak. Words tumbled out before I could censor them. "I'm not here to deny my flaws or pretend I'm something I'm not," I said, my voice heavy with emotion. "But don't dismiss me just because I don't have a lot of money. I've worked hard my entire life, and at 62 years old, I'm proud of the man I've become." Rachel listened, her expression unreadable, but the shift in the room was unmistakable. The atmosphere grew tense, the conversation teetering on the edge of a deadlock. Her response was as poised as it was resolute. "It's not about dismissing you," she said evenly. "It's about ensuring that any partnership I enter elevates my life, not complicates it. At this stage in my life, stability and comfort are non-negotiable. If those aren't guaranteed, I'd rather remain single." Her words, though logical, felt like a slap. They were sharp, stripped of sentiment, and painfully pragmatic. The matchmaker, sensing the growing tension, tried to steer the conversation back to a more neutral ground. She urged us to look beyond material concerns and consider whether there was a deeper connection worth exploring. But Rachel was resolute, her gaze unwavering. "I'm not willing to settle for less," she said firmly. "If there's no home to share or a plan for a better future together, then there's no point in continuing this." Her clarity, which had initially felt empowering, now felt suffocating. Sitting across from her, I couldn't suppress the wave of frustration and disappointment that washed over me. Rachel, who had seemed elegant and refined at first, now struck me as cold, calculating, and transactional. Her unrelenting focus on material conditions reminded me of Laura, another date that had ended in disillusionment. Both women seemed more preoccupied with what I could offer financially than who I was as a person. Was this the reality of dating now? A series of negotiations, devoid of warmth, vulnerability, and genuine connection? As I left the meeting, a storm of questions swirled in my mind. Is this really what relationships have been reduced to? Have love and companionship been replaced by bank statements and property deeds? What happened to the ideals of shared values, mutual respect, and building a life together? Was I hopelessly clinging to an outdated vision of love, one that no longer had a place in this modern, pragmatic world? For the first time, I began to question myself in ways I hadn't before. Had I underestimated the importance of financial stability in a partnership? Or had I simply been unlucky, crossing paths with women who prioritized material comfort above all else? It was a sobering thought, one that left me feeling like an artifact of a bygone era, a man searching for something that no longer existed. The truth was hard to swallow. Twice now, my connection attempts had failed, and both times, money and expectations had been the breaking points. It was disheartening, to say the least. I had entered this process with the hope of finding a companion, someone to share life's joys and burdens. Instead, I felt like a relic, out of place and out of touch with the values of the world around me. And yet, a small, stubborn voice within me refused to give up entirely. "Keep going," it whispered. "Keep hoping." But the doubts lingered, heavier than ever. Was there still room for love and connection in a world that seemed to value wealth and status above all else? Or was I destined to keep searching for something that had quietly faded away, lost to the march of time? As we come to the end of this heartfelt story, it's time to reflect. What have we learned about love, relationships, and the realities of finding companionship later in life? Is it about compromise, self-awareness, or holding on to what truly matters? I invite you to take a moment to think about one thing from this story that resonates with you. What lesson will you carry into your own life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what struck a chord with you and how you plan to apply it. If you enjoyed this video and found it meaningful, please take a moment to leave your comment below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss out on more stories and insights like this one. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.